The Council of Chiefs meeting that morning was as heated as the sun above Amankwo. I stood quietly behind the king's throne, my spear held upright, as the elders argued over the king's latest decree. The New Yam festival must be held earlier this year, Igwe Chibeze declared, his voice steady and authoritative. The harvest has been good, and the people need to rejoice after the difficult planting season. Most of the elders nodded in agreement, but Mazi Nkema Konam, as always, was quick to voice his opposition. Your Majesty, he said, his tone polite but sharp. The gods have not spoken about this. Who are we to decide the time of celebration? Should we not consult the chief priest first? The other elders exchanged uneasy glances. While Mazin Kem's words seemed logical, his true intentions were well known. He had long been envious of the king's authority, often questioning his decisions under the guise of wisdom. The gods have blessed our harvest, the king replied firmly, and it is the duty of the king to lead the people in thanksgiving. This is not a matter of debate. Mazin Kem's lips coiled into a thin smile. Of course, Your Majesty, he said, bowing slightly, but the tension in the room was palpable, and I could see the anger in his eyes as he returned to his seat. The meeting ended, but the unease lingered. As the guards escorted the elders out of the palace, I noticed Mazin Kem lingering by the doorway, speaking in hushed tones with one of the other guards. Their conversation ended abruptly when they noticed me watching, and Mazin Kem walked away with a smug expression. That night, disaster struck. If you are enjoying this story, please tell me where you are watching from on the comment section. Give me a follow, like, and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you. The sacred staff, the heart of the king's authority, and the symbol of Amankwo's connection to the gods vanished. I was on duty when the alarm was raised. The king himself discovered the theft, his cry echoing through the palace. The staff, it is gone. We rushed to the king's chamber to find him staring at the empty stand where the staff once rested. His hands trembled and his face was pale. Who has done this? He asked, his voice filled with a mix of rage and despair. A search party was quickly organized. The guards combed every corner of the palace, but the staff was nowhere to be found. When the Council of Chiefs was summoned, the tension in the room was unbearable. This is a terrible omen, one of the elders said, shaking his head. Without the staff, the gods may abandon us. Mazin Kem stood at the center of the group, his voice rising above the others. This is a failure of leadership, he declared, pointing an accusatory finger at the guards. How could the sacred staff disappear under your watch? And what is the king doing about it? His words spread doubt like wildfire. The other chiefs murmured uneasily, their faith in the king wavering. I watched Mazin Kem closely, noticing the glint of satisfaction in his eyes. While the others panicked, he seemed calm, almost smug. The chief priest was summoned to consult the gods. He arrived with his sacred instruments, performing rituals and chants to seek their guidance. The room was silent as everyone awaited his verdict. Finally, the chief priest stood and shook his head. The gods are silent, he said. The king's shoulders slumped, and a wave of despair washed over the room. Without the gods' guidance, Finding the staff seemed impossible. In the days that followed, chaos spread across Amankwo. The crops began to wither, animals fell sick, and the villagers whispered of a curse. Mazin Kem continued to fuel the unrest, subtly blaming the king for the kingdom's misfortunes. Perhaps the gods are displeased with the king, he suggested during a council meeting, his tone measured but cutting. Perhaps they are calling for a change in leadership. The other chiefs exchanged uneasy glances, and I could see doubt creeping into their faces. The king, however, remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. One night, unable to bear the kingdom's suffering any longer, I approached the king. "Your Majesty," I said, bowing low, "there is one man who might help us, Ezakonobi, the oldest man in the village. He is said to know secrets even the gods have forgotten. Perhaps he can guide us." The king hesitated, but desperation won out. The next morning, we made our way to Ezakonobi's hut. The old man greeted us with a knowing smile, as if he had been expecting us. "You seek the sacred staff," he said, before the king could even speak. "Yes, wise one," the king replied. "Our kingdom is in chaos. The gods are silent. What must we do?" Ezakonobi closed his eyes, his expression solemn. "The gods are not silent. You have been misled. To find the truth, you must seek Ichoku, the ancient native doctor who lives deep in the forest of Amankwo. He is older than memory itself and knows what others cannot see." The king frowned. The forest of Amankwo was a place of danger and misery. But with no other options, he agreed. The journey was treacherous. The forest was alive with the sounds of unseen creatures, and the shadows seemed to follow us. At last, we reached Ichoku's hut, where the ancient native doctor awaited us. "You seek the truth," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "Yes," the king replied. "Please, wise one, help us." Ichoku began a ritual, chanting as smoke filled the room. In the swirling mist, we saw Mazin Kem and a palace guard sneaking into the king's chamber, taking the staff and hiding it in a cave. The chief priest's face appeared next, accepting a bribe to lie about the gods' silence. The truth was out, but the journey to retrieve the staff and restore peace to Amankwo was only beginning. Ichoku's hut was filled with an eerie silence after the swirling mist revealed the damning images. The staff, hidden deep within a cave. Mazin Kem, his smug face illuminated by torchlight, handing a bribe to the chief priest. A guard I recognized all too well, sneaking through the palace corridors with the sacred staff in his hands. I glanced at the king, whose jaw tightened as his fingers curled into fists. His breathing grew heavier, but he said nothing. The other elders exchanged wide-eyed glances, their expressions a mix of disbelief and fear. "The cave," Ichoku said, his voice breaking the stillness. "It lies beyond the river, on the edge of the forbidden cliffs. But be warned, the path is treacherous, and the cave is protected by ancient traps. Only those with sharp minds and steady hearts will succeed. The king turned to me, his face set like stone. Obiora, gather the trusted guards. We must retrieve the staff before the sun sets tomorrow. This cannot wait. Ichoku's glowing eyes lingered on the king. Your Majesty, he said gravely, only a select few can enter. Too many footsteps will disturb the spirits guiding the cave. Choose wisely. The journey back to the palace was heavy with tension. The revelation of Mazen Kem's betrayal weighed on everyone, but we dared not speak of it yet. If word got out too soon, it could spark chaos, or worse, alert Mazen Kem to our plans. As soon as we reached the palace, the king summoned his most trusted guards. Among them was Chukwudi, a man known for his sharp instincts and unshakable loyalty. The king explained the situation in whispers, his voice low enough to avoid prying ears. Obiora, Chukwudi and I will lead the mission, the king concluded. The rest of you will secure the palace. No one must know we've left. I nodded, though my mind raced. The cave was far. The traps were a mystery, and Mazen Kem was still in the palace, likely planning his next move. The stakes were higher than ever. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over Amankwo, we slipped out of the palace under the cover of darkness. The journey to the cave was long and filled with dangers. The river, swollen from recent rains, was nearly impossible to cross. But we pressed on, driven by the knowledge that the future of Amankwo depended on us. When we finally reached the cliffs, the entrance to the cave loomed before us. A dark mound in the rock, its edges carved with ancient symbols. The air was thick, with the smell of damp earth and something sharper, metallic. My heart pounded as we stepped inside, the faint light from our torches casting eerie shadows on the walls. The first trap revealed itself almost immediately. A narrow passageway was lined with pressure plates, each etched with symbols we couldn't decipher. Chukwudi crouched low, studying the ground. We stepped wrong and we are finished, he muttered. I followed his lead, watching as he carefully placed his foot on the first plate. It didn't move. He took another step, then another, testing each one before signaling for us to follow. The passage seemed to stretch forever, each step feeling heavier than the last. Suddenly, a loud click echoed through the cave. Chukwudi froze, his face pale. Run, he shouted, shoving me forward as the walls began to close in. We sprinted, the sound of grinding stone filling the air. My heart thundered in my chest as I barely squeezed through the narrowing gap, landing hard on the other side. The king and Chukwudi followed, both panting heavily. That was close, the king said, his voice tight. We can't afford any more mistakes. The next chamber was filled with stalactites, their sharp points glistening like teeth in the torchlight. At its center stood a pedestal, and on it rested the sacred staff. Relief flooded my chest until I noticed the faint shimmer of threads across the room. Traps, I whispered, my stomach sinking. One wrong move, and I took off, not needing to finish the statement. We moved carefully, weaving through the delicate straps as beads of sweat formed on my brow. When we finally reached the pedestal, the king hesitated. The staff glowed faintly, its power almost tangible. As the king reached for it, a low rumble filled the cave. My heart stopped. Had we triggered something? Take it and move, Chukwuma urged, his voice shaking. The king grabbed the staff, and the rumble turned into a deafening roar. The floor beneath us began to crumble. We ran, the path we'd taken collapsing into a dark abyss behind us. I didn't dare look back, focusing only on the faint light of the cave's entrance. We burst out into the night, gasping for air. The staff was safe, but our troubles were far from over. By the time we returned to the palace, dawn was breaking. Mazinkem greeted us in the council chamber, his usual smugness replaced with unease as he saw the sacred staff in the king's hand. Your Majesty, he began, his voice faltering. He betrayed your king, the king interrupted, his voice cold as steel. And now, the gods will have their justice. The guards stepped forward, seizing Mazinkem and his accomplice. The chief priest, who had been summoned to the chamber, looked pale as the king's gaze fell on him. You too will answer for your crimes, the king said. As Mazinkem was dragged away, his shouts echoed through the palace. You think this is over? This is only the beginning. But for the first time in moons, peace began to settle over Amankwo. The staff was home, the gods' favor restored. Yet, deep in my heart, I knew Mazinkem's final words were more than a threat. They were a promise.